What it is, y'all? Welcome to another Danmachi video. My name is Pilk, and today we are going to be talking about the part one, and I will say part one of 3 story event for Aedes Vesta. Basically, the anniversary event for Danmachi Memoria Freese. And before I get into it, I want to say we're going to start off with the spoiler-free content. Now, we will get into some spoilers later on, but in order to make this basically work, I just want you to understand, first of all, like, this is a long tale. There's a lot of information in this tale, so we're gonna skip over a lot of things. We're basically gonna jump to the get to the chase, and we're not gonna be sitting there, dwelling too much on specific things, because there's just so much. And I'll also say this: if you have not watched the story event, definitely do it. Like, part one's gonna be around basically the whole time. You have like 3 months to watch this whole thing. It is long, and we did it all on stream, and we had an absolute blast. Also, unfortunately, I do have to say this: part 2 apparently is not gonna have the voice acting available at launch. They're having some unfortunate issues with that, so part 2 probably will be available. It'll be available, but it won't have the voice acting. So for me personally, I'm going to be waiting until that drops before we do the streaming of it. But let's just go ahead and get into part 1 of this event, because it is insane. Absolutely nuts. First things first, overall, just my general thought process on this. This is not the most, how can I say this, lore-driven thing. It does work a lot on the lore, and if you know anything about mythology, there's a lot of mythology involved in this. It is pretty wild in that regard. That said, I don't see this having a huge amount of impact overall on the franchise, and that is one unfortunate thing. Second anniversary, third anniversary, both those, basically, if you ever go look anything up on Danmachi, at all, the franchise as a whole, they're considered part of the canonical history. And I think that's amazing. This event, not so much. Basically, it's really hard for this to fit in the timeline. Very hard for this to fit in the timeline. In fact, I don't think it does at all. I think you really got to flex your definition of everything for it to fit. Mostly, and I will emphasize mostly, because it happens as a consequence. Not really a consequence, but in the same timeline as the film. If you didn't watch the Arrow of Orion film, number 1, go watch that. This is going to have so much more impact, especially the end of part 1 is going to have so much more impact if you know the film. Because the film, number 1, fantastic. Love the film. It is in my top 10 of all anime-related films, ever, even though it is nigh impossible to fit into the franchise's timeline. But, so overall franchise impact is extremely low. I'm gonna give it a 5 out of, overall franchise impact, only because, and I'm gonna say only because, they reference so much, and I love the film so much, and it actually gives the film something to do. But it's not actually going to affect the rest of the story. It's not going to have any effect on the light novel. It's not going to have effect on the anime, the manga, nothing. It really is next to impossible to fit in there. But it uses so much from the series that we know, so much from the movie, so much of everything else. I'm going to have to give it a 5. And that's just literally based on what it does with what it has. But just know it's not going to be considered canonical to the rest of the story, sadly. Tension. Man. 10. An absolute 10. Knock out of the park. And we're talking we're literally watching a thing that is literally sliding frames. This is not an actual anime. It's not fully animated. How much I would love to see them make an OVA of this with actual full animation. Oh my goodness. That would be amazing. There's so much to this story and so much going on, but as far as full tension goes, it is an absolute knockout of the park. It is phenomenal. And it builds and builds and builds until the final moment of what you think is the final moment. And then that isn't even the final moment. There's even more to that. Now, I'm going to go from tension into comedy, because even that final moment, so they kind of like, not even the final, the second to last thing that happens, even leaves you with like a snicker. Like as soon as they hit you, like it's a gut punch to the emotions. The immediate, like when the climax of part 1 happens, and you're reeling from that. I was like darn near in tears because of how everything went down. Yes, that is, consider part 1 a tragedy of sorts, and it is. It's very much tragedy. It's so flippin' good though. But the comedic moments, they come on, but then they know they don't ruin it. Like the comedic moments tend to go away. They're there when you need them, but then they kind of like, peter off a bit. A lot like the film. So you have some funny moments at the beginning. You have some funny moments when you meet some of the characters and re-meet a specific character. But largely, this is more of a serious story. So I'm going to give comedy a 7. It knows when to happen. It doesn't happen terribly often. This is far more of a serious thing. We did a review of the OVA, the Dion Cacti OVA, the Bathhouse one, and that was like 100% comedy. This is very different. This is more of the tense, dramatic portion of this. Now, action. There is some action. There's a lot of action involved in this, as far as like, they're fighting off various things, which I will go into when we get into the spoilers. But how would you rate action? I'd almost give it a 7 as well, only because it's not the pinnacle of it. The vast majority of this is the dramatic aspect. So as far as overall action goes, I'm going to give it a 7, because when it's on, it's on. And do remember, once again, this is sliding frames. You got to use a little bit of imagination. There are moments of tension, moments of action, and often they intertwine. But the vast majority of this is the drama. So let's go ahead and get into the drama. Overall drama, I'm going to give it a solid 10. Period, end of discussion. It is rare that you get a story like this out of a game like this that invokes so much emotional response, especially for me. So to be this emotionally invested in the story is just absolutely 100% completely insane. All right, this is one of, if not the most emotionally driven stories that we have had in the game, at least that I can recollect. That's including crossovers, that's including other, like last year's was great. Don't get me wrong, last year's was great, but it never had that moment with me like this one did, just during part 1, mind you, where I was absolutely floored. And I have to go I don't even think Second Anniversary had that. I don't think Second Anniversary had it. I don't think Third Anniversary had it. First Anniversary was a whole different animal. Nothing's quite hit me like this with this. The only thing that's come close was literally the movie. That's it. So, overall, my enjoyment factor. And bearing in mind, this doesn't necessarily mean, like, was I happy the whole way through? Like, because you can enjoy something on a level of, like, still being, I guess, miserable, but that's kind of, it's a tragedy. It's supposed to make you kind of ponder and whatnot. So I'm going to say overall enjoyment. You know what? I'm just going to give it a solid 10. And I know that's kind of a cop-out, but I really did enjoy this. I got fully emotionally invested. There were certain characters that they introduced that, I mean, are kind of designed to go that way, but at the same rate, it's just, it is what it is. It is a truly, 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 truly enjoyable story. Once again, guys, if you haven't read it, if you haven't experienced it, if you haven't been through it, definitely do so. It is so unbelievably good. It's such a great story. And we're only part 1 of 3. That says something. It really, really, really says something. So, now, I'm going to skip gears here. I'm going to put in an ad break right here. I'm going to skip gears and we're going to get into some spoilers. So, spoiler warning right now. If you do not want to be spoiled, and I mean, if you do not want spoilers from this, you definitely need to end the video, hit the little thumbs up button, let me know like you enjoyed this, put your comments in the comments section down below, and with that, let's get into it, okay? So, our story pretty much kicks off in Arario, which isn't a huge spoiler by itself. I mean, you kind of have to be there, but there's, you know, all this talk of Hermes, and then they introduce Aphrodite and the lead up to this, and we kind of knew immediately from the promo kind of what was going to happen. Case in point, this whole thing right here running behind me. That alone kind of spoiled part 1 of what's going to happen. So there wasn't like ever a question that this was going to end nicely. This was one that was going to just absolutely set out to devastate and crush you. And I think the difference between this and last year's event, because last year's event was also a very much a tragedy. It was the downfall of the downfall of Reus Familia. It was the downfall of like all those people. Like, you saw a lot of folks like just absolutely die last time. It was wild. It was crazy. I don't think from a narrative standpoint I got quite involved with like RD and Elise and those types of characters quite like you do here with this, because this is Hestia. She's like the second character you meet in the story. She is, you know, Belle's goddess. She really is like the cornerstone of the series. So to have the, I mean, really the gall to mess with this character shows just, I mean, and it's done very tastefully. Like, obviously, not terribly happy with what happened. We'll get into that in a moment. But to do this, to go this far, and to be this extreme, it's literally just going to make it that much more emotional. But basically, to get back to it, Hestia and Belle, as well as Hestia's Familia, are all driven off of the island, and they're taken to Olympia. Now, Olympia, they're introduced to the idea of the primordial flame and all this stuff, and the flame is corrupted. Now, I'm going to hop out around here a lot. I'm just going to paraphrase so this video isn't too terribly long. Also, once again, you've already read or watched this, depending, hopefully, fingers crossed, because we are in spoiler land now. So, as far as this goes, basically, you know from the moment they hit the island, from the moment that Ilya is introduced, from all of this, you know where it's headed. The one thing that absolutely gut punched me, and I kind of knew where it was coming, but when they introduced Cyan, the little blue-haired girl, when they introduced her, you kind of, it's like that, it's like that girl in the red dress moment. If you don't know what I'm referencing, go watch Schindler's List. Holy shit. But it's that moment where you introduce this character, where you instantly know that this is not going to go well. It kind of goes a little against color theory. I'm not going to get too deep into that, but it's very interesting. But what's interesting about it is she has a very similar, like a bluish tone to her hair color, similar to Hestia. Not quite the same. Hestia is quite a bit darker and whatever, but it definitely foreshadows what's going to happen to Hestia. And when she's introduced, there's like a back and forth and this whole thing that happens. And then almost like, I'd say immediately, you're introduced to the Flaminoids. And little by little, things get like, they introduce the Flaminoids. Oh, they're not supposed to be here. This happens, this is happening, this is happening. And Rhea, I think that's how you pronounce her name, one of the main priestesses, start like, like basically like starts just more or less talking about cyan and all this stuff. And that's when you realize that the Flamonoids are the people on the island. And introducing that little girl, and now the idea that they have to fight these, basically fight her and all the villagers off, is just absolutely gut-wrenching. I think that was the first moment where I really just, like, my jaw hit the floor. I was just absolutely shook by that. It was insane. Then to note that that Rhea, pretty much, I think that's how you pronounce her name, she's the mother of Cyan and the other little girl that Cyan references. Like Cyan's story is already tragic, but then to throw like this on top of that, because she's talking about she's buying, you know, flowers for her little sister, and she's already a little girl herself, and then for, you know, this kind of revelation that they've been doing this for, what is it, like hundreds of years or something, some crazy amount of time, like just an absolute insane gut punch that blew me away. And the I can't remember his name now. It's awful. It's on the tip of my tongue. But the male antagonist, when he's first introduced, like, you know immediately, this dude is absolutely not. He's, case in point, he is not going to be any good for the story. And his turn was definitely not surprising. And the reveal of, like, Prometheus's, as we called it on stream, tweets, where they're like, oh, Prometheus drops down all these notes for us, and we just literally follow them blindly. Nobody's ever met Prometheus. Nobody knows. The reveal that he's kind of behind that was really not altogether surprising. Like, that, unfortunately, I think was just a little predictable. It definitely doesn't take away from the emotional impact. But to get to the final moment, so we don't, like, drag this out, because this is only part 1 of 3, so who knows what's going to happen from this point, when Hestia is literally just, like, fed to the flame, and is surrounded by the flame, and goes through this metamorphosis, and literally, as you're going to see here in a moment, is engulfed in flame, and literally becomes Vesta. She says goodbye to Belle, and, like, the whole goodbye sequence, you know, is like an absolute gut punch to her. That whole sequence is probably one of the most emotionally driven, crazy, like, it was only foreseeable, like, once you get Cyan's story, if you didn't already have the promo art and everything. Like, we went into it knowing what was going to happen, and that, for me, didn't take away from the emotional value of it, because still seeing it, seeing all the lead up to it, the writing of her interaction with Belle. I have heard some critical analysis of this saying that she would never do this to Belle or her familia, and I understand that. I get where you're coming from with that, but everybody's kind of, like, in dire straits at this point. This is not a situation that anybody wants to be in, that anybody expected to be in, and everybody's just kind of acting in a reactionary fashion. So, as far as that goes, I really do feel like Omori wrote this one absolutely splendidly. And this is, once again, only part 1. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what part 3 brings. But after you get Vesta, then she basically, like, teleports everybody everywhere. Like, she's like, everybody get out. Just go. Shoo. I'm going to do my thing. Sends Belle off to one side. Sends everybody else off to another side of the island. And this is, well, I guess most of them were off anyway. But Belle is transported away. And, yeah. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens. Because obviously, if you watch you know that Apollo shows up. And Apollo, I mean, Hestia's powers are sealed. Hestia's powers are gone. Belle has no Falna. Belle has nothing. Nobody, the big reveal at the end is nobody has Hestia's Falna. Nobody has anything. they're roughly powerless. Now, to be fair, I believe that the story goes, and once again, excuse me for not remembering exactly, but I believe the origin kind of goes, Bel was in the dungeon anyway before Hestia, so he's got some, like, latent power to him. But he's, comparatively speaking, powerless. Like, he's had it good for a long time. For a lot of power for a long time. And now he's just kind of without. So he's just relying on his own physical strength. We'll see where that takes him. Now, I do kind of feel like we've already seen temporary alliances with familias. I kind of feel like we're going to see something with Apollo. I would not be shocked if maybe not Apollo himself, but another deity kind of shows up and they ally with them, or maybe Apollo takes him back. Apollo kind of can't go back to Arario, but I feel like something's going to happen that they're either going to ally with Apollo, use his Fauna, or something to kind of be able to rectify this. Now, what I don't understand is Artemis. Artemis is dead, and Artemis showing up to Bel. I don't know if she's showing up, like, as... because she can't come back down yet. Like, she's dead for all intents and purposes. So I don't know whether... I don't know what that is. I don't know if that's a vision of Artemis. I don't know what's actually happening with that. Or, who knows, everybody could just ally with... with Aphrodite. There are ways to then obviously get Fauna and level back up and get back in the mix. But as far as like this moment now, nobody yet has any power. Everybody's just kind of in limbo. They're normal, everyday people. And they're on an island now. Well, I mean, I guess the Flaminoids are mostly gone now because obviously Hestia's purified the flame, but just now we have to figure out how we're going to get Hestia back. Obviously, we know it's going to happen. There's no question. It's going to happen. But if I'm honest here, that's what's going to be fun. Because part 3 is all going to be that getting Hestia back. Part 2 is going to be figuring out how it's going to happen. So part 2, I'm sure that is going to be the story of trying to figure out how they're going to rectify this. Like going through the process of figuring out how to fix this problem. They might go back to Arario. I kind of doubt it since Apollo's have been involved. And it seems like the barrier's back up. They might not be able to escape. They're probably going to come up with another plan. So either Apollo or Apollo. There's Hermes. Who else is down there? Obviously Aphrodite. Like there's enough gods/goddesses around that, they could get fallen and they could get supported. But what is Artemis going to be doing? I don't know. And that was the one thing that I did not expect. That it hit me like a sack of frickin' bricks to the face. When Artemis showed back up, anybody who's watching the stream, you can go back and watch the stream. I might link it in the description down below. I gasped. I was not ready for that. And once again, if you haven't watched the film, go watch the film. You need to watch that to fully understand why that moment is just gut-wrenching, but also amazing. It's like a reunion, but also like she can't be back. It's surreal. It's just... Anyway, guys. Most everything, like the build-up was there, but like the reaction, the backside of this was just unbelievable. Guys, I am floored by this. I'm really looking forward, like super looking forward to part 2 and seeing where they're going to go and how they're going to fix this, because this isn't going to be an easy thing. This is going to be an absolute just... It's going to be a ride the whole way through. Let me know your reactions and your thoughts in the comment section down below. Don't try to get too caught up in, does it fit the canon? Does it this? Does it that? Blah, 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 blah. Let's enjoy the story for what it is. I do wish it was more canonically inclined, but, you know, at this juncture, I think for the story they've written and for that he's written and for what we received, I think it's just absolutely amazing. I'm sold. I could give a perfect 10 if I almost, I would love to, but I can't in all reality do that. It's just, it's great, but it's, you know, there are not problems, I would say, but just based on the story that it's telling, there's just no possible way to do that. But, you know, it's easily my favorite story we've ever had in the game, period. Let me know your thoughts. Like, comment, share. I'll be back with more Danmachi here very soon.